Hi and welcome to Cosmic Consciousness with Cassia. On this channel we discuss all aspects of the Ascension process. I have a variety of different services that I offer to assist you in your awakening journey, and you can find those listed in the description box below. So we're just going to jump right into it today. We're doing the weekly Astrological Ascension Energies forecast for the week of the 22nd through the 28th of August. And what a week it is going to be. As usual, we have some beautiful and intense energies going on. Some really dynamic combinations and aspects that the planets are making to each other. And what I'm going to do in this video is discuss those different aspects and energies and how we can best utilize those for our continued growth and empowerment. I do a reading as well, so for those of you who prefer the reading, I will timestamp that below and you can jump to that if you like. But I encourage you to listen through as we discuss these energies because it really helps you get more of a feel for the reading as we step into it. And it's just so much useful information. The more we know, the better we can sort of prepare for our week and navigate those energies as they come up. So on the 22nd, we have the sun entering Virgo. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is Virgo season. And what a season it is going to be. This Virgo season is starting off with a bang because we have Mercury and the sun conjunct right now in the sign of Virgo. They've been conjunct. They were conjunct last week. The conjunction is fading a little bit. They're not quite as close together, but they're still very much in relationship and very much influencing each other. And so what this means is that we're going to have just an incredible amount of mental energy going on this week. We also have Mercury moving into a sextile with Uranus, and we'll get into that and what that means a little bit later. But basically where that is just supercharging this energy and adding in this whole new exciting aspect of ingenuity and just the psychic downloads and the epiphanies and just all of the potential of that connection. Like I said, we're going to get into it. It's really exciting. But that's just turbocharging things, right? So we want to talk a little bit about Mercury and Virgo, right? So Mercury is the ruler of Virgo, and Mercury is exalted in the sign of Virgo. And what that means is that Mercury functions at its best when in the sign of Virgo. Virgo is one of the two signs that Mercury rules. Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. And we don't love Gemini any less, but somehow in the sign of Virgo, Mercury is able to express himself better. And that's because Virgo is that earth energy, right? I say this all the time because it's such a beautiful and interesting combination. We have an earth sign ruled by an air planet. And so in the sign of Virgo, Mercury is able to be grounded and stable and very laser focused. Like in the sign of Gemini, Mercury's kind of just bouncing around different ideas, different concepts, different people, different conversations. And that's a beautiful, curious energy that has so much potential, right? But in the sign of Mercury, I almost said. In the sign of Virgo, Mercury is able to really fine-tune that focus and really accomplish a lot more because the thought project is much more structured and strategic. And so that's what we're looking forward to as we start off this Virgo season, is that really structured, strategic way of looking at the world, of looking at and viewing our own thought processes, of looking at and viewing ourselves. And so this can be really helpful if we can capitalize on the beautiful aspects of Virgo. It can also be challenging, and so I want to touch on that as well. This is an energy that can be difficult only because the sign of Virgo can be very particular, right? The Virgo is the sign of the Virgin. And what that means is that it's a sign that is always looking to purify itself, to raise itself to the next level, the next ideal, the next standard. Virgo is a very perceptive, very intuitive sign. Virgo is a very analytical sign. Virgo can see and read into situations and people on multiple levels. And Virgo can also apply this own discernment and does apply this own discernment to the self. So there's no other sign with the caveat. Scorpio has this potential as well. But so Scorpio and Virgo have this ability to really see into themselves, right? And so Virgos have this ideal and this idea of what they can be, right? But they also have this very realistic idea and understanding of what they are. And so this is sort of the push-pull dynamic, right? This is where the tension comes in, because Virgo can look at a situation and really evaluate it and understand it, and does this to themselves. Like Virgos do this to themselves all the time. We look at ourselves, we see ourselves, and I say we because I have a ton of Virgo in my chart. We understand ourselves and where we're at. We also see all of the potential that exists within us and where we could be. And sometimes what happens is we get really hard on ourselves because we are here and we know we can be here. And so it's this constant drive and this need for perfection, right? And this can get overwhelming if we allow it to. The trick for Virgo is to look at themselves in this as this ever-evolving being, but to look at ourselves with love and compassion and acceptance of where we're at, knowing that it's in our nature to strive to be bigger and grander and better. So of course we're going to continue to do that. And accepting and loving ourselves for where we're at doesn't mean that we are being complacent and that we're not going to continue to evolve. It just means that we're being okay with where and who and what we are in this moment, right? And we're putting that perfectionism on the shelf for a minute. There's a lot of chance for self-criticism, for perfectionism, for really picking ourselves apart and picking other people apart as well. And so we want to look out for that, and we want to utilize this energy, especially with this sextile to Uranus, this really inventive, inspiring energy. I mean, with this sextile to Uranus, it's like we are going to have the opportunity to really, if there's been a situation that you've been struggling with, you haven't really known what to do about it, you haven't known how to act, and this is reminding me of the reading I did for I think it was last week's astrological forecast that it came up. Or maybe it was one of the zodiacs, I can't remember, but this idea of like needing to act but not knowing exactly what to do. This conversation between Uranus and Mercury is really going to help us figure some of those things out. We may get some really I wanted to say intense, I wanted to say exciting, it is those things, but unexpected flash of insight into a situation, of a way to handle a situation, of a solution that we didn't even know was possible. Like Virgo is the sign of solutions. Like you have a problem, let's find a solution. That's how Virgo operates. And this can be very irritating for people sometimes if they're the kinds of people who want to just kind of vent about their problems and they don't necessarily want any solutions, because Virgo's not really about that. We're more like, okay, all right, so you have an issue, but like you don't, like this doesn't need to be an issue anymore. Like let's figure out what we can do about this, right? It's like, let's take that action and see how we can make this better. And so we are going to be able to harness that energy, and these flashes of insight and inspiration from Uranus are really going to help us to do that. So that is the exciting aspect. That's the energy we want to get into. We want to utilize this energy in order to plan ahead, to plan for the future, to figure out these situations that we maybe haven't been able to wrap our heads around, to really just utilize that energy in its highest and purest form, and really try to stay away from being too hard on ourselves, being too perfectionistic, pushing those ideals onto other people. This week, above all else, I'm feeling as a week that's really going to show us what our ideals are and whether or not we're measuring up to that, and whether or not the other people in our lives are measuring up to that. And then what to do about that. Like those places where we need to make decisions where all of that is concerned, those places where we're acting out of alignment with our ideals and our values, and where we're not moving toward that ultimate picture of where we want to go, those things that are standing in the way of that, all of that is going to be highlighted for us this week, which sounds really intimidating, but it really is absolutely beautiful. And yes, I am going to be referring to my notes quite a bit during this video because it's a lot of information to cover. So just fair warning. Yeah, so on the 22nd, we also have two T-squares going on. Or really the way I look at it is it's kind of one massive T-square because we have Pluto and Saturn, which are back within a few degrees of each other. So we have that energy sort of coalescing again as well, which just adds to the intensity of this week. And so we have the moon, which is on the 22nd in the sign of Libra on one end. Then we have Mars and Aries on the other end. And in the center, making 90-degree angles or squares to each of these planets, we have Pluto and Saturn. And so this is like the easiest way to sum up this energy would be with the moon in Libra versus Mars and Aries. This opposition that we have going on, it's the needs of the others versus the wants and the needs of the self. And how to balance those things out, how to harmonize those two things. And so if we're trying to harmonize a T-square, what we want to do is look at the planets making the squares. Those are the focal planets. Usually planet, but in this case, planets, because we are so lucky like that. It is an incredibly potent combination of energies that we have going on with Pluto and Saturn. And so that's how we harmonize. That's how we make sense of it. That's how we bring balance to those two energies. And so Pluto and Saturn together are really calling us to take responsibility for our actions. I'm feeling a heavy karmic energy with this. And so any situations that are bringing up these issues for us right now have very heavy karmic undertones. And so they're different. It's going to be different people that we're involved in soul contracts with, different repeating patterns and cycles where we haven't been able to find that balance in the past. This is happening for us right now. Like we're resolving that right now through how we take action during this time. And we really want to be careful because we don't want to create any more karma. There is the potential to heal karma right now. There's also the potential to create more and to create karma that we don't necessarily want. And so we want, like, we're in the process, we can't carry karma with us into the fifth dimension. So we're in the process right now of clearing out all of our karma. That's why things have been so intense for so many people in this lifetime. And especially as the ascension energies have been ramping up throughout 2020. It's because we're clearing out all of that. We're clearing out lifetimes of karma. We're clearing out eons of karma on this planet for the collective, right? And so that is so intense, but it is so beautiful. And it is going to be so liberating. It is so liberating as we work through this. So yeah, a lot of karmic energies that we're clearing out that have to do with this balance of the other versus the self. How do I harmonize that? How do I find a way to still address my own needs and my own desires, but also address the needs and desires of other people in my life, right? Because Libra is a sign of relationships. And so it's about that balance. It's about that even give and take in relationships. So we're really looking at this from that aspect. And we're looking at, we want to be responsible with this. We want to look at any areas where we may be abusing our power, right? Pluto is the sign of power. Saturn is the sign of, or the planet of power. Saturn is the planet that of time, of structure, of authority, of rules, right? And so we're looking at this, but we're also looking at any of those belief systems, any of those structures that aren't fitting us and aren't serving us anymore. So we're wanting to look at this and balance this out from the perspective of what is resonating with us. Back to, like, what are my personal ideals? What are my values? Not what are the values that the world, right, Capricorn, society has instilled upon me. But what are my own personal ideals and values? And how do I balance my needs and the needs of others based on that? Not based on what everyone else is telling me to do, right? This is a big energy that we've been working through right now. But based on what I know to be true, based on my own morals and my own ethics, which is where a true sense of integrity comes from. Integrity doesn't come from operating under the moral compass of others. It comes from finding our own moral compass and then standing firmly and strongly in that. And so we're really being called to that with this combination right now. Yeah. So with a lot of these different energies that we have going on right now, because our mind is so elevated and the mental energy is so strong, like our manifestation power is off the charts right now. So we really want to be aware of that, and we also want to look at wielding that power with care. With great power comes great responsibility. So really wielding that power with care as we move through the world. So I wanted to bring that up as well. Yeah. And we want to try to look at the bigger picture here. Virgo is a sign that can get very focused on the little details. So like that's another trap as we have this Sun and Mercury conjunct in Virgo energy, is like, don't get bogged down in the minutia. Look at all the little pieces and how they can fit together, but don't get hyper focused on the little pieces. We're looking at the bigger picture here right now, guys. We're utilizing that sextile with Uranus to really look at the larger picture of things and operate and strategize and plan from that point of view. So I want to put that out there as well. And we're going to be driven as well with this Uranus and Mercury sextile to be looking not only at our own personal relationships and needs and that whole struggle like we were talking about with the moon and Mars and all of that, but we're also going to be thinking about the collective as well. Like Virgo is the sign of service, right? Virgo and Aquarius, which is the sign that Uranus rules, is the sign of the humanitarian. And so with this Uranus and this Virgo energy, we're really going to be looking at the bigger, like we were just talking about, that bigger picture. We're going to be wanting and desiring that need to be of service to the greater good, to the greater whole, to the collective, is really going to be amplified during this time. And some of us may get some really interesting breakthroughs on how we can be of service. And we have Mercury and Uranus, Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. So this is like, when I say this mental energy is off the charts, I mean it's off the fucking charts. I was going to say, excuse my French, but no, it's that intense that it requires that language. Like, this is astronomical energy when these two planets get together. And so these are also the planets that rule social media, communication, technology. And so Uranus is like new cutting edge technology, and Mercury is like the technology that has been accepted and integrated by the masses. So we could be seeing some major breakthroughs in technology as well, in social media, the way that we utilize social media. Just so much going on around all of that. We may be receiving unexpected communications through social media during this time as well, or just unexpected communications in general. But we're really looking at it from that lens. So we're in all of that energy as well, all of that creative, ingenious kind of inventive energy, which is really, really exciting. And just really learning how to utilize all of that for the greater good. Like when we talk about technology and social media, in a lot of ways that's been twisted, and we do see the dark side of that and how that can be disjointing and how it can be separating. But we also see the way that the power that has to bring people together, right? Like we have channels like this all over YouTube where people who are awakening are getting together and sharing their knowledge and sharing their information and their wisdom and their light with each other. And that's fucking beautiful. And then, we have the darker side of it too. But we're really anything, like it's two sides of the same coin, right? So anything that can be used for one can be used for the other. And I think that we're going to see some major revolutions and some energies coming up around that as far as how we utilize social media and technology and communications, and sort of like really bringing that back home and bringing that back into the light, and how we can utilize that to move forward in a productive way together. And we may see that being utilized and advances being made on the other side of the spectrum as well. But as they advance, so do we. So don't worry and don't stress about that too much. But a lot of different stuff coming up around that as well. We still have Mars squaring Pluto and Saturn. That energy, if you want to know more about that, check out the weekly Astrological Ascension energies forecast from last week. We got into that a lot, and that feeling of being kind of like the bull butting your head against the walls, and all the areas where we feel that we're blocked as far as either by ourselves and our own insecurities and our shadow aspects, or by society at large, by the structures that are in place in our lives, by the expectations, all of these different things. Like, we're still feeling that energy. That's an underwriting energy as well to still be aware of. And we also have true black moons squaring the nodes of the moon. And so this is a lot of moon, a lot of lunar energy going on with this. And this is another aspect that we want to be wary of, because true black moon is true black moon Lilith. And so this is the repressed and suppressed feminine, the wild, rebellious feminine energy. And so with this square to the nodes, this is like a lot of past life, current life, really looking at, we're going to be possibly focused on some of the history around the suppression and repression of the feminine. Some of these wounds are still going to be coming up. We may find ourselves acting out in areas where we still hold wounds, whether they're our own or wounds of the collective. And so our feminine side may be wanting to act out, whether outrightly aggressively, passive aggressively. We may have issues of our sexuality, feminine sexuality coming up, the way that that's utilized. We have another interesting aspect going on. I'm trying to find it here. Yes, a sextile to Saturn and Pluto that true black moon is making as well. And so that's really going to emphasize those energies, because Pluto is the planet of power and sexuality and intimacy and all of those shadow aspects. And Saturn, which is boundaries and structure and restriction. So really feeling rebellious, like the feminine is going to be feeling very rebellious, and may be called to act out in some of those different ways. And so we just want to be wary of that. We want to be aware of that. We want to know that if we're seeing people in our lives acting in ways around those energies that maybe we don't approve of, or we're finding ourselves judging them for, to then internalize that and turn that back around and see where that judgment's coming from and what exists within us that we're also judging. Because typically when we have a judgment of someone else, it's something that exists within us. Not always, and it doesn't necessarily mean that exact quality exists within us, but still we can tell something about ourselves every time we judge another, even if it's just necessarily where our vibration's at. To use an example of this, it's sort of like, one of the hot button topics currently is racism, right? And so we may feel justified in judging someone for being racist. And if I'm judging someone for being racist, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm racist, but it does mean that there is still some anger left inside me, right? It means that I'm still unable to see that person in the light of being a spiritual being who's just stuck in their human and just very confused and mixed up and drenched in that programming that society has instilled inside of them. And when I'm judging them, I'm not showing them compassion. And so what I'm doing is amplifying that energy. Whereas if I can find it within me to show them compassion, then I'm diffusing that energy. And so sometimes it's just our judgment is just a mirror of where we're at with our own spiritual journey and our ability to sense and understand ourselves as all reflections of the one. And sometimes it is something that exists within us. So I wanted to clarify that, because it's not always. We talk about how everything's a mirror, and a lot of things are, but not always necessarily in a direct way. Like, they may not be reflecting something that's within me. Sometimes they are, and so I have to use my discernment and figure that out. And that's where that Virgo mental energy really will come in handy, right? Of being able to look at that realistically. But sometimes it's just a mirror for something else that's triggering something else within me, some other wounds within me, somewhere within me where I can still do some growing and some healing in whatever fashion that may be. So yeah, I wanted to put that out and sort of clarify that. Yeah. And so we may during this time as well have more information coming out as far as the abuses of power when it comes to sexuality. And I'm feeling this is in terms of women, but I'm also seeing this coming out a lot in terms of children and everything that we have going on with the abuse of power and the sexual exploitation and trafficking and abuse of children. So we can, I think, expect to hear more about that, and expect to hear more about this as it relates to the feminine as well, and those wounds, and more of that information coming to light during this week and during this time as we really kind of dig into these things, and really people standing up and demanding justice for that, demanding acknowledgement for that, and demanding justice for that. Okay, and then let's see, we're going to go back up here. Notes. We also have Venus opposing Jupiter and Pluto this week. And so this is an interesting energy because it's going to be, we have Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn. I mean, they're all over the place in this week, which is part of what makes it, besides the Uranus and Mercury with the sun, all the Virgo and the Uranus and Mercury energy. That's the other thing that makes this week so intense, is all these aspects that planets are making to Jupiter and Pluto and Saturn. And so we have Venus opposing Pluto and Jupiter. And this is an energy that's really going to be calling us once again to look at our relationships. It's also making a trine to Neptune at the same time, which is really interesting. And I think this is going to be helpful for us because this trine to Neptune is going to soften this energy a little bit and help us to get into a more intuitive space in sorting through this kind of stuff. But it also may make us a little overly idealistic, so we want to watch out for that. But yes, Venus opposing Jupiter and Saturn. We're examining our relationships, our relationship to ourselves, our relationships with other people. We're examining any of those false belief systems, those false narratives, those old wounds. Any of that stuff, once again, is coming up, and it's going to keep coming up until we heal it and we address it. So the sooner we're willing to do that, the better. And the reason that this keeps repeating is because healing happens in layers. And so we work through that first layer, and then we work through another, and then we work through another, and then we work through another. So this is a deeper layer of this that's being revealed to us. As far as our belief systems around relationships, our habits around relationships, the way that we are able to give and receive in relationships, the exchange of power in relationships, and whether that is even or not, whether our relationships are helping us to expand or causing us to contract. And we're feeling with all of this energy as well. Sorry, I got distracted by the expand and contract statement, because that's this ascension process is a constant process of expanding and contracting. When we're expanding, we're coming into the higher dimensional energies. And when we're contracting, we're moving more into the lower dimensional energies. And so it's this process that happens. And every time we allow ourselves to get bogged down in all of these old outdated modes of believing and thinking and behaving, we contract ourselves. And so the way to allow ourselves to expand again is to look at that, acknowledge that, and then release that and move beyond it. And then we start expanding again, to bring that love, to bring that compassion in, both for ourselves and for others, and then allow ourselves to expand again. And so what different forces on this planet are trying to do right now is to instill fear in us and doubt in order to cause us to contract. And so we want to dispel that by bringing love into that, by bringing love, trust, faith, hope, and then expand again. But it's this natural process that does happen, this expansion and contraction. And so it's nothing to get too hard on ourselves about, right? With all that Virgo energy. Don't get too hard on yourselves. If you feel yourselves contracting, allow that to be, experience what's causing that. Really look at and evaluate that, and then decide what you want to do about that. Bring the love into that and allow yourself to expand again. And what happens eventually is that the contractions get smaller and the expansion gets bigger. And we spend less time contracting and more time expanding. until eventually we are just this expansive energy, right? But it's a necessary part of that process. We just don't want to spend too much time in here. We want to try to spend the majority of our time out here when we can. And we can look at and we can evaluate ourselves, and we can even do shadow work in this expansive process when we're able to look at things from that higher perspective, which is beautiful because that's an energy that we are being assisted by with Jupiter and Neptune, is allowing us to do that, to see things, especially with this Neptune trine, to see things from that higher perspective. We want to be careful with this energy because we can fall into the trap of, well, we can fall into a couple traps. We can fall into the trap of escapism. We can fall into this trap where all of a sudden our minds tell us that maybe it's easier to revert back to these old patterns and these old ways of being because, well, they did kind of work for us in the past, right? And for some of us, it may be necessary to go back into that so that we can put on those shoes, walk in them for a while, and realize that they don't fit anymore. But for a lot of us, that's just going to be a waste of time. So do not fall into that trap. Do not get seduced by those old behaviors, by old escapist tendencies. Those are not serving you anymore. They are not going to do you any good. Sometimes it's when we're in that contracted state, it feels uncomfortable. And so we want to expand without having to do the work of looking at the things that we need to look at so that we can let that go and get into this process of expansion. But like any way that we're choosing to escape is an artificial expansion. It's not real. It won't last. We will come back into that state and be right where we left off before. And so we want to be willing to look at that stuff, to sort through that stuff, to bring the love and the compassion for ourselves and others into that stuff, and naturally allow ourselves to begin that process of expansion again. And because we've addressed some of that stuff, when we expand a little bit larger and we're a little bit lighter than we were before because we're holding on to less of that. We're carrying less of that. Whether we're aware of it or not, we're carrying it until we address it and deal with it and transmute it. And how do we transmute it? By looking at it, by viewing it, by allowing it to be real, and then deciding that that does not have to define us and does not have to be an integral part of our existence anymore. And then we let it go. But in order to transmute that into light, we first have to acknowledge that the darkness exists. And we have to acknowledge it from a state of non-judgment. And yes, just trying to check anything else as far as this goes. Yeah, the second trap that we could fall into is that overly idealistic trap. With this Venus and Cancer energy, with this Neptune and Pisces energy, it's very feeling, it's very intuitive, it's very nurturing, it's very like it tends to make us want to look at things through rose-colored glasses sometimes. So we don't want to fall into that trap either. We want to allow this Virgo energy coming through with this, supported by this Uranus energy, with this Saturn and Pluto energy, right? To allow us to see things for what they are and to accept things for what they are. And once we accept it, that's that process of transmuting it. If we deny that something is real, we deny and deny and deny, we're never going to move past it. It's the elephant in the room, right? But if we can deny or admit that it exists, then we can address it and do something about it. And so we want to be able to look at things, bring in that realism, but just allow that softer energy to make it not feel so harsh and not feel so scary, and sort of call in the energy that way, but without allowing that film to develop behind our eyes again, right? It's going to be really tempting sometimes. One of those old habits that we may be being called to release right now may have to do with that, with looking at things through the rose-colored glasses, with wanting and desiring something to be a certain way so much that we just pretend it is because it's easier than facing reality. And so if that's a pattern or a trap that you've fallen into in the past, this is absolutely a message for you, telling you not to allow yourself to do that sometimes. Look at the elephant in the room. Talk to that elephant. Understand that elephant. Empathize with that elephant. And then let that elephant go and live where he belongs, because he doesn't belong in that room. Just checking my battery here. We may have to split the reading into the second part because my laptop battery, I was hopeful, but I think it's going to die. I think it's going to die, you guys. But yes. What else do we have? There's one more major aspect I wanted to cover. Yes, we have Jupiter sextile Neptune as well. And so this is another energy that can lead to these escapist tendencies, right? Jupiter is that big, expansive, idealistic energy, and Neptune is that mystical kind of energy. And so with these two together, it's incredible, like psychic communication, psychic capacities are heightened. The downloads, the information that we're receiving is going to be able to pour in between the Mercury Uranus sextile and the Jupiter Neptune sextile. I mean, you can absolutely take advantage of this energy, meditate, attempt to connect with your ancestors, with your angels, with your spirit guides. It's like these portals of energy that are almost open right now, facilitating that connection. So really capitalize on that and take advantage of that. Take advantage of the creative opportunities, right? Write some music, make some art, appreciate some music or some art if you're not quite at the phase where you realize that you are capable of doing that, which we all are. We're all these beautiful, artistic, creative beings. But if you're not there yet, then go out and at least appreciate some art. Appreciate some of the beauty in the world. We're really going to want to do that this week with all of these heavy, intense energies. We're going to want to take some time out to connect with nature, to connect with the things that we find beautiful and peaceful, and to connect with that joyful, creative part of ourselves. So that is, I really want people to be open to doing that and to remember to take some time to do that this week. Your soul is going to be communicating with you, and so just listen to what your soul has to say. Let it speak to you however it's going to speak to you, whether that's why you want to go out and do some of these joyful things. It may communicate with you through music, through art, through writing, right? This is a great time to do automatic writing, through the books that you randomly pick up and decide to read, through the conversations, the spiritual conversations that you have with people. So many different ways that this energy, these beautiful energies and your guides can communicate with you this week beyond just meditation and stuff like that. But we are going to be receiving on a super conscious level so many downloads and so much light and information. Yes. And because Jupiter is in Capricorn, that grounding earth sign, we are going to be grounding and integrating that energy as well, which is beautiful. So a brief overview here of what we can kind of expect for certain days. The 24th, we have a bisextile between the moon, Pluto, and Neptune, as well as the moon trining true black moon. And so this is going to be, I feel, the most highly supercharged, mystical, creative day. If you're trying to make contact with your spirit guides, with your ancestors, if you're trying to do anything sort of mystical or witchy or any of that kind of stuff, the 24th is going to be a really great day to do that. If you want to sit down and write something important and creative from the heart, this is a beautiful day to do that. Poetry, that automatic writing, like all that stuff that I was talking about, the 24th is the prime day for that. So get out and do that and really take advantage of all this beautiful psychic and mystical energy that I'm feeling really coalescing on that day. The 25th then, it could be a bit of a challenging day. We have a lot of the aspects that I've been going over hitting their exact point. So throughout the week, these planets are moving into aspect with each other. And the day that they make the exact aspect, say the trine hits exactly 120 degrees, the sextile hits exactly 60 degrees, the square hits exactly 90 degrees. A lot of that stuff is happening on the 25th. We also have a ton of extra squares going on. We've got the sun square moon, sun square Mercury. And so this can be a bit of a challenging energy. Sun square moon is always a lot of tension because it's the emotions square the logic, square the mind. And just, it's a dynamic, challenging energy. We're going to leave it at that. And so it may really feel that way. And then we also have, as we said, the sun square Mercury. So, yeah, just just a lot of feeling at odds with ourselves, possibly feeling at odds with others. We really want to watch how we're communicating with people on this day and try not to take things personally if people communicate with us in a way that doesn't resonate with us, that hurts us emotionally, that we feel offended or affronted by people. Just know that everyone's dealing with these energies right now in the way that they know how. And that is going to vary. Not everyone has astrological forecasts that they watch that can tell them and warn them about these energies. Not everyone is doing the work to really understand and sift through and sort of see like what's mine and what's not and all of this different stuff, right? So just have compassion for everyone and where they're at, and just work on keeping your side of the street clean, really standing and communicating in your integrity. That's all we can do. The moon is going to be in Sagittarius, and so we can utilize that energy as well. Just really that free-flowing energy, that energy of learning, of being open to different viewpoints, different cultures, different understandings and perspectives, right? And we want to stay out of that lower vibration of Sagittarius energy that can be very dogmatic and very stuck in their beliefs and their ways and their mindset. We want to stay out of that and be in that open, explorative kind of energy. A wise man does not argue with fools. That's something that I wrote down that came to mind as a good guidepost for this day. That, and then the other one that I always say, which is like, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? Like, don't spend time arguing with fools. Honestly, some of us may think that we're arguing with a fool and then halfway through the conversation realize that the fool is ourselves. So just be really careful with that so that we don't have to stick your foot in your mouth later. And just remember, the truth is relative and everyone looks at things from a different perspective. And just because their perspective is different doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just different. And then on the 28th, we also have a very intense and emotional day. The moon and our personal planets are making a ton of aspects. The moon is going to be conjunct Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter, opposing Venus, trining Mercury, sextiling Neptune. It's just a lot of, and then our personal planets, which would be like Venus, Mars, and Mercury, just making a whole bunch of connections with each other and with other planets. Too many to really list and go over. It's going to be a lot. It feels to me almost like a culmination or a climax of all of the energies of the week kind of coming together all at once and sort of presenting us with opportunities to really put into practice some of the things that we've learned and some of the things that we now understand. And so, yeah, once again, it's another day where we want to be cognizant of the fact that everyone's going through the same struggles that we're going through, if not outwardly, then inwardly, so much of the same stuff, and just have love and compassion for everyone and just keep it focused on the self. What have I learned? This week is all about, like we talked about, really fine-tuning and getting in touch with, like, what are my values, what are my ideals, and how am I living up to them? Not how is everybody else living up to them, how am I living up to them? And how can I take ownership of my own life and the direction that it's going, right? Like, I create my own reality. So that can be empowering, or that can make me feel like a victim, depending on my perspective and how I look at that. Even if things aren't shaping and shifting the way that I would like them right now, I can trust that some of that is for my higher good, and I'll understand later, and possibly this week with some of these dynamic, with the Uranus-Mercury connections and the Jupiter-Neptune. I may understand some of this week, actually. But some of it I may not understand right now. I may never understand, and that's okay. But a lot of the other stuff is actually just of my creation, right? And so instead of saying, poor me, I can't believe the hand I've been dealt, or the hand that I've dealt myself, right? I can say, oh, wow, that's incredible. I created that. Now let me create something different. Now let me take all of these energies and what they're showing me about myself, and let me turn that around. Let me fine tune that. Let me decide who and what I want to be and how I'm going to get there. Let me then take action on that, right? And so that is some incredible, empowering energy when we can really take ownership of that and be like, okay, I created this. Now I'm ready to create that. And this week is really going to show us how, which is absolutely exciting and absolutely amazing. So I am going to end this so I can put my computer on the charger, and I'm going to do the reading portion separate and post that as well for you guys. And we'll see how that goes. We'll see if you guys like that. Maybe I'll start doing that as well. We're very fluid on this channel. We go with the flow of things. We're testing things out. We're trying things to see what resonates with people and see what they like. I love you all so very, very much. Drop a comment. Let me know how this week's feeling for you. Let me know as the week goes along. I love hearing your feedback. I love connecting with all of you. There's a link to donate to my channel if you feel so moved to do so. It helps to support all this free content that I love, love, love making for you guys. And also, as I said, check out those services if you're interested. I do personal healings. I do personal readings. I do personalized ascension transit charts that can really help you to understand how these energies are affecting you personally based on your own natal chart. So reach out for any or all of those services if you are interested. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. It really helps this video get out to more people, even though I trust that everyone who's meant to view it will view it when they are meant to. Still, never hurts. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you like this video and you want to catch more, hit the subscribe button, click the bell with the little squigglies so you get notified when I put out more videos. I love you all, and I will see you in a few minutes for the reading portion.